So how was Ghana?
Ghana was fantastic. Amazing. 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
What was the best?
Yeah.
What was the best moment in Ghana?
So we did a lot of partying, but we also had a lot of family time. So it was
Yeah.
like my grandpa's 90th. So all of my cousins came. It was like a mini reunion.
Mm-hmm.
So that was nice on the wholesome side. On the partying side, like there were some really good times. Everyday People was one of my highlights.
Everyday People.
Everyday People.
Is that an event?
It's a It's from like New York, and it's like they're now doing it in Accra, Lagos, Atlanta, all over. But yeah, it's like a US party, so it was a different vibe, which I enjoyed.
Okay, maybe I'll be there one day.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I recommend. They do them in London in summer as well.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So yes, we will talk about psychology.
Mm-hmm.
One question I wanted to know is why psychology in the first place? What drew you to psychology?
My mum asked me that many times when I decided to do it. To be honest, like I can't really remember why I chose to do it at A-level, but it came from like, so I would have been year 10 choosing A-level subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was curious about it. I was like, well, it sounds cool. In my mind, it was very much like, oh, it's going to be kind of like CSI, or it's going to be like a crime documentary, like understanding the reasons why people do things. So I was like, cool, I'll just take it for A-level and see how it goes. Either I'll do psychology or I'll do law. Those are my two like avenues. So I picked my A-level subjects to enable me to do both.
Yeah.
And then I did psychology A-level and I just absolutely loved it. Like I found it so interesting. And in A-level, you do a lot of the fun stuff. So like a lot of the social psychology and like group behavior and like personality and things like that. Whereas at university, it was a bit more, it's a lot more sciencey.
Yeah.
So a lot more stats, a lot more like lab reports. So it wasn't quite as fun as particularly in first year of uni, but in A-level, I absolutely loved it. And then to be honest, like I had no idea how to become a psychologist. Like I feel like the pathway to become a qualified psychologist in the UK is like, it's really long and like not many people know how to get there. I feel like a subject like medicine, it's quite like there's a clear path that most people know. You go to uni for 5 years or whatever, and then you're a doctor. So when I picked it, even for uni, I had no idea. I was like, vibes, like something I enjoy. And then very slowly along the way, I feel like I had to figure it out. And now I'm like 10 plus years deep.
And did that lead you to doing your PhD? Like, do you have to do a PhD in order to be a
clinical psychologist? Yeah, you have to do a PhD. But then like the gap between bachelor's and PhD, like that's where it gets very murky. Some people do a master's, some people don't do a master's. Some people work clinically, like as an assistant psychologist. Some people work more in research. They'll be like a research assistant or something. So there's no one clear way to get onto the doctorate, and it's highly, highly competitive because it's funded by the NHS.
Yep, yeah. So my brother does a PhD. He didn't go. He literally went from bachelor's straight to PhD. He didn't do the masters. What's your PhD in? What are you studying? Because I think people that do PhD, I just think it's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Because essentially, I know it's a project and all that stuff, but you're essentially doing a project that you find interesting, and obviously getting funded for it or whatever, paying for it, and literally gaining the results to back your thesis. So what's your PhD in?
So the doctorate for clinical psychology is slightly different to a traditional PhD. So traditional PhD, you would have like a research project that you're working on pretty much for the entire 3-4 years. It's just you're working on this one piece of research. Whereas this is more of like a training program. So I have 50% of my time is spent working on placement. And then we have taught lectures, which is also kind of different to a traditional PhD. And then we have like assignments outside of that. And then we do a research thesis as well.
Okay.
So you really start thinking about your thesis in first year, then you start putting things in place in second year, and then third year, you're actually doing it. So that's where I'm at right now. And I'm exploring, my thesis is on intersectionality. So I'm exploring like how identity impacts building therapeutic relationships with Black African nurses and service users or patients.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm in the middle of that right now.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think, again, because it's kind of like a taught doctorate, we get we have like a research fair at some point in second year, and they kind of all of the lecturers kind of tell you what they're doing already, and you kind of choose what you're interested from that. I wasn't interested in any of them, so I decided to get my own supervision elsewhere and do my own project, basically.
Yeah, good stuff. Do you feel like you have to be passionate about being a psychologist? Like, do you think anyone can do it, or you actually have to not necessarily love it?
I think so. I think it takes too long to if you don't care about it. I think a lot of people drop off along the way because they're like, this is too long. Because I'm many years outside of bachelor's and I'm still not qualified. So I think that it's definitely something that you would have to have a real interest in or a passion for to do
in
that.
The long run.
Yeah, and like some of the work, well, I'll speak for myself, some of the work that I've done, like to gain experience working in mental health, it's not fun. Like it's not like sitting in an office and like moving numbers around. You're working with people that are really in distress.
It's demanding, right?
It's demanding. Yeah. My first job outside of bachelor's, I was like a healthcare assistant and I was working 12 and a half hours shifts, like on your feet all the time, like taking patients to Sainsbury's. Like it's a lot of work. Yeah, so if you don't love it, if you don't love helping people, or you don't, that's not one of your values, like I don't know why you'd put yourself through that.
Because my cousin, I don't know what her job title was, but she works with people like autism, Down syndrome, and like PTSD, like young kids. Yeah. And the stories that I hear is just crazy. It's literally mentally draining, obviously for the good reasons, because you're helping, but we can only praise you.
Yeah,
can only praise you. Since studying the PhD, how have your views and perception changed on mental health from when you started to like now? Because obviously I feel mental health is becoming more of an issue in the day and age. So how has it kind of changed or your perception changed since when you started?
So I think everybody kind of has different placements on my course. So you might have different experiences depending on who you speak to, but I never worked with kids before the doctorate. And I've had 2 placements now where I'm kind of working with kids and young people. And that kind of shifted my perception because, I don't know, in my mind, and I guess like cultural attitudes towards mental health as well, like seeing kids that are 5, 6, 7 struggling with their mental health was a bit of like a shock. Because they're so young. I was kind of used to like, teen years and all the stuff that goes along with your adolescence causing mental health problems, but kids in that early. So, it really just points to like how systemic like mental health is. It's not just an individual thing, because obviously at 4 or 5, your whole life is influenced by where you live, who's in your house, and stuff like that. So that was a bit of a eye-opener for me. And currently I'm working with young people who are at risk of different types of violence. And we use like creativity to like engage them. And it's supposed to be more of like a early prevention to things like knife crime and things like that.
Yeah.
So again, like it's kind of like working on the ground with people that, you hear all the statistics about knife crime and what the youth are doing, and the government's taking money from like youth services and stuff. But so to actually see it in practice, that's been really interesting for me as well.
Yeah. What was I going to say? In terms of being a psychologist, what would you say is like the most important role in being a psychologist? Is it patience? Is it being creative? Like for you specifically, obviously I know it'll be different for every psychologist, but for you in particular, what role or personality trait that you think you need or helps you in being a psychologist?
You need to be resilient because like I said, you're working, depending on where you work with people who potentially are in real distress. You hear things that are very distressing. And we have like kind of safeguards around that. So we all, as a psychologist, you would have like weekly supervision with another psychologist to kind of talk about your personal feelings and like thoughts around the cases that you're working with to make sure that you're not burning out essentially. Yeah. But you need to have some level of resilience because it's not easy to hear things like that every single day. But ultimately, I think it comes down to empathy. Like, if you are empathic and you're compassionate towards people, that's going to keep you going, I think, in a profession like this. Like, you actually have to care about the people that you're working with, and actually believe in their capacity to change. Because I think some of the places I've worked in, you work there for a period of time and then you feel that, like, the team here, like, I guess because it's so difficult, their morale is low, or like their hope for the people that they're working with to change can sometimes like decrease. So you have to maintain some level of like compassion and empathy.
Yeah, it's important. Like you said, you're working with people, so you have to show that emotion that you care, that you're willing to help them.
Yeah.
What's like the impact that you, how am I trying to say this? I'll go on to the next question. Okay. That was really bad. That was really bad. One thing I wanted to talk about is depression. Because I've got quite strong views on depression. I've had a lot of friends that have sadly tried to commit. So me personally, I don't believe in the diagnosis of depression, but I do believe people can feel depressed in terms of feeling sad, feeling upset. And obviously, and I know coming from a psychologist, it will be interesting to see like what your views are on depression as a whole.
Well, a lot of psychologists are kind of anti-diagnosis because, well, like psychiatrists who are like medical doctors, they love a diagnosis. Whereas as psychologists, we try to think about things a bit more like holistically. I think sometimes people can find the label of depression quite stigmatizing. Like, you're telling me that I'm sick, or like I'm unwell, or it's kind of my fault that I'm feeling this way, or it's my neurotransmitters, or it's my hormones, or whatever. I think I see it more holistically. So people, of course, can go through severe periods of low, like feeling low and having low mood and things like that. Lack of motivation, not wanting to do the things that you like. But I think that it's caused by so many things that it's almost not even sensible to have one label for it, if that makes sense, because everybody's going to have such a different experience. Some people will be they will stay at home and they will not want to go out and they will not want to see anyone or do anything, and other people they're still able to have that social interaction, but they're still feeling depressed. So it's like, if you can have so many different types of experience and you call it one thing, then I don't think that's very helpful. I do think that sometimes people like having a diagnosis because it makes them feel understood. So I think if it works for you, if you want a diagnosis, fine. But I think it's more helpful to think about people in their entirety. I think when we talk about depression and then we go, prescribe with anti-depressants and things like that, it kind of takes away from all the other things that cause people to feel low. So poverty, racism, and lack of education, and all these like cultural and systemic factors. Depression in the UK won't be the same as depression in Ghana. So I think it's personally better to think about people in a holistic way.
Would you
I don't
say
know if that answers the question?
Yeah, no, it does, because how I see depression, I see depression as feedback. And feedback can either be negative or positive. If it's negative, obviously you can work on that negative feedback to be more positive. It's all situational, right? But that's how I see it. I may be wrong, but I see depression as situational in the sense that the current situation that you're in can always be changed. Because I don't know if you've heard of Bob Proctor. Have you heard of Bob Proctor? He's very heavy on like the mind. And one thing I wanted to ask you as a psychologist, because my sister does psychology, and there's this theory. How many states of consciousness is there for you? There's like some Franken iceberg theory or something like that. It's definitely wrong, but
I don't know how many states of consciousness.
Yeah, like you got the conscious mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind.
Yeah, 3. I was going to say 3.
See, I only believe to be subconscious and conscious mind.
Why is that?
I mean, I don't know why, but from what I've read, I know that the conscious mind has the ability to reason. When I say reason, it has the ability to accept or reject an idea. And obviously, everything, for me, I believe, everything happens from your subconscious mind. There's a law that is called the perpetual transmutation of energy, which is essentially the spiritual must always manifest into the non-spiritual.
Okay.
Meaning it all starts with the thought. Everything is caused by the thought. And once that is accepted by your subconscious mind, it then gets impressed and then moves into the body that we live in, the external factors. And that's why I say depression is feedback. Because I know it's easier said than done, but if people were able to manage the thoughts that come in, reject the ones that are negative, and accept the ones that are positive, it wouldn't be a thing. People wouldn't go through these issues. Obviously, like I said, it's easier said than done. We're all going to have bad days.
I think there's a school of thought in psychology that definitely agrees with this kind of thinking. So CBT is very heavy on CBT essentially says you're depressed because, well, the cognitive part anyway, you're depressed because you're thinking bad thoughts and that you've developed this like unhelpful thinking pattern. And if we just kind of reverse the thinking pattern, then the depression goes. And CBT is one of the most popular treatments for depression in the UK. Partly because it's cheap, quick, that saves the NHS money. But also because it focuses on the here and now, so it doesn't take quite as long. But I think there's lots of other schools of thought in psychology that kind of discount that. Like, yeah, it kind of makes sense that if I just not think bad things or like try to undo the bad thoughts, that my depression will go away. But I think it ignores a lot of other things that impact your like well-being. So like in like psychodynamic psychoanalysis, it's all about the subconscious and the unconscious. So you might look at things like dreams, you might look at what we call like subconscious urges or impulses that might be coming out in our everyday that we're not aware of. A systemic school of thought might think you're depressed because of all of the other systems that are around you. Like, what's your family like? What's the culture that you live in? What does that say? Your race, your gender, all of these things are impacting. So it's not just one person experiencing depression, it's like the entire system that has created this. So there's lots of different ways to think about it. I think I probably lean more towards like the systemic side. But I think that CBT does teach you some useful things. So it is helpful to obviously challenge the negative thoughts that come into your mind. But I don't necessarily think like that's the only reason that you're depressed. Yeah. If that makes sense.
There's other factors.
So many other factors.
Yeah. I mean, that's only what I've studied. And that's only what I know of. But it's interesting that you say that. I know that you mentioned medication. Again, I'm quite heavy on
medicating.
Medication.
Okay.
So, when they're depressed, they give you antidepressants. I personally don't believe in them because I had one friend that was taking antidepressants and one of the side effects was suicidal thoughts. Like, how can you be creating a drug that one of the side effects, they're already, vulnerable in quotation marks, not feeling great, and now you're going to give them a drug that's going to enhance that. So yeah, as a psychologist, what's your views on medication? Do you believe in it? Do you think it helps in certain situations?
I think it helps in certain situations. For me, I would, in an ideal world, people would have access to talking therapies in a reasonable time frame and use medication last. That's in an ideal world. That's not the case though, because it takes people so long to access therapy on the NHS. And then a lot of people can't afford private therapy. They don't have access to that. So you end up going to your GP does like a quick screening tool and they say, do you want this? And that's generally how it goes. I think personally, I'm not really for medication a lot of the time, because I think in my mind, eventually you're going to have to stop taking them. So what's your life going to look like when you stop taking them? It does. I know it does work for some people. So usually when you start taking antidepressants, like there's a short period of time where your risk actually goes up because your body's now being introduced to this drug, and like you said, there's like a risk of suicidal thoughts. But then after a while, it does kind of taper off, and a lot of people that take them report that they feel a lot better. Yeah. So in the short term, fine, I understand. If someone's in a point of real crisis and they need something to just get them through the next couple of weeks, fine. But I think it should be a short-term thing. I don't think that you should be on antidepressants for 10, 15 years. Because, again, it's like, I think there's so many systemic and social and cultural factors that are making people depressed or low or sad. Especially now, especially post-COVID, everybody's isolated, everybody's lonely. That I think if we just medicate everyone, it's kind of telling people that like there's something wrong with them when actually there's a lot of things wrong with society
in general.
Yeah. So yeah, I would prefer it if people could have access to talking therapies, if people could have access to like more of like a community rather than medicating. But I think with depression, that's how I feel. But with other things like psychosis or schizophrenia, it is slightly different because sometimes people get to the point where they can't interact with therapy, as in their mind isn't clear enough to interact with therapy until they have medication. Yeah. But yeah, for depression, I feel like I would try other things if I could. Yeah.
You mentioned it being more of a society thing. What is there like a stat that states one societal issue is linked more to depression?
So I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but there's lots of research to say that you're more likely to be depressed if you are living in poverty. Even down to the point where if you look at how many GPs are located in different parts of London, there's fewer GPs in poorer areas. So you have less access to getting therapy or getting help for whatever you're going through. Like you literally, there's actual literal barrier to accessing treatment. Obviously race, immigrant status. If you're an immigrant into this country, you're more likely to be depressed, which kind of makes sense if you think about the way that the UK treats immigrants. Yep. Obviously, racial factors. So I guess like social mobility. So if you're an inner city kid in London and you've been kicked out of school or you go to prison or something, that's obviously make you more likely to experience poor mental health. Drugs. If you're a recreational drug user, there's lots of other factors, which is why I just feel like it's so like it's so much more than, I guess, going through a hard time or having like a massive life event that makes you depressed. There's just so many other reasons why that might happen.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the goal for Amma in psychology? Where does she want to be?
So I would really like to either set up a service or have an initiative to help Black people with their mental health, because there's a real racial inequality in mental health services in the UK. So Black people are more likely to be diagnosed with something like schizophrenia, more likely to access mental health treatment through the criminal justice system. So mental health gets to the point of crisis, they either get picked up by the police or they have some sort of police involvement and end up in mental health services through that. More likely to be sectioned on the Mental Health Act. There's so many things that are affecting Black people as a group. And then if you think about even as a potential to be psychologist, majority of psychologists are white women, middle class white women. So then you think about, okay, who are the people that are going to be working with these disproportionate amount of Black people in the mental health service? And then you think about all of the theories and the models that they teach us in order to help people, so CBT and things like that, are created for people in the West, basically. They're Eurocentric. They see mental health in a very European way.
Yeah.
So if you're working with someone who's an immigrant from Ghana or Nigeria or somewhere else, the way that they would see their mental health is completely different. And there's a lot more of like a religious and spiritual influence than someone in the UK. So even the way that we're taught to work with people is so different. So I would like to have some sort of service that is kind of tailored towards specifically helping Black people, where hopefully there are more psychologists that look like me, working with people in a way that actually benefits them and that reflects their own like idea of mental health, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible, but
anything's possible.
yeah, that's where I'd like to take it.
Yeah. Are you on track? Like, how can people help that?
So on a personal level, reading, I think there's a lot of things that they don't teach us on our course, on a clinical psychology doctorate. So I'm learning a lot more about like community psychology, liberation psychology, which has more of like a social action, social justice element to it.
Okay.
So kind of addressing some of the things that I was talking about. So psychologists being at the forefront of like campaigning for things that are directly impacting people's well-being and mental health. So yeah, learning more about different ways to help people outside of what we're taught.
So being aware.
Being aware. Yeah, I think that's where I've started anyway.
Cool. Good stuff. So I'm just weary of the time. So everything at the end of every episode, I ask my guests a series of questions.
Okay.
They're quite quirky. Some of them are quirky anyway. So yeah, the first one is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and how would it impact the world?
Teleportation.
Okay, let me rephrase that. It can't be teleportation, invisibility, strength. Come on, man, that's a bit boring, man.
I mean, that would be really handy.
Okay, but
that would be really helpful for me.
But then how's that going to impact the world? How are you going to use that to impact the world?
That's a personal thing. A superpower. I don't know I don't think this is a superpower, but if I could help the world to do anything, it would be the redistribution of wealth.
Yeah, that's a superpower.
I think it just doesn't make sense that so many people have so much money and so many people have nothing. So I would do some crinkum crankum and redistribute everything so that everyone
I think
has
one of my
things.
guests said something similar to that. They said that, I think Larry said it, being able to go into the minds of people that have more money to be able to then stop being selfish.
Tell them to give it away.
Yeah, along those lines.
Yeah.
Advice. What advice would you give to someone that's trying to become a psychologist? Maybe in particular trying to become a Black psychologist in particular.
I would say reach out to people that are further ahead than you. I think I've been quite lucky that I have a friend in the field who has really helped me. So at every stage of like applying for an assistant psychologist job, applying for the doctorate, I've been able to look over like their applications and things like that. So that's been really helpful. A lot of people don't have that, and I didn't. In the beginning of my career, I was a bit lost as to how to even qualify. So I would say reach out to people that are also in the field that look like you. There are aspiring Black psychologists groups like on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. Actually, there's a group on Instagram that they hold talks specifically around Black mental health and things like that. So I would join one of these groups and just seek help from people at every stage. And also, I guess, know that it's possible. I think a lot of people like me, I applied to the doctorate 3 times before I got on.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And that's a story for a lot of people who are trying to get on, but particularly for Black people and other ethnic minorities. So I guess know that it's possible and don't be discouraged by the fact that you might not see a lot of people that look like you, because I think at the end of it, we need more Black psychologists.
Yeah,
So,
we'll leave all your details in the description. So,
thank you.
and any material that you give to me, I'll put in the description.
Cool.
Who's had a significant impact on your life, and why? Can be anyone. Can be dead. They can be alive.
Significant impact. It's really cliche to say like your mom,
Yeah.
but I feel like probably my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why so?
Because I think for as long as I've been like an adult, she's talked about what it's taken for her to get to where she is, and the amount of work and sacrifice that she's had to make to come to this country as an immigrant and like make something of herself. All the things that they've had to, like my parents had to deal with when they came to this country. In comparison, like my life has been so chill. So I think that perspective of like, oh, if you really wanted to get stuff done, you could get it done is helpful. Like when I'm feeling lazy or like I'm procrastinating, I'm just like, I have a lot of blessings and a lot of privilege compared to what my mum faced when she came into this country. So just like study. If that's all I have to do, like I think that's easy enough. So
I'm right. Big up Mumsy.
yeah.
Big up Mumsy. What's one quote that you live by?
A quote that I live by. I actually recently saw one by I think it's Andre Lord. And it was, if I don't define myself for myself, I'll be crushed into other people's ideas and fantasies for me and eaten alive. So I saw that and I was like, that's so like, because I think a lot of people, when you get to like your late 20s, you're kind of figuring out your identity, who you are, what you stand for.
Yeah.
And I think like, oh, actually, if I define who I am for myself, then I can't be bent by other people's opinions and
Damn right.
other people's like, I don't know, wants.
Yeah, you tell them. You tell them. Anna. You tell them.
But yeah, that was a good quote.
What does so the podcast is obviously called The Endless Race. What does the endless race mean to you in terms of like life?
The endless race. Being, I guess, like, my life goal is to be content. Is to be, I think happiness is like something that a lot of people pursue, but I think just contentment and peace. That if I could have elements of that throughout my life, I think that is where I want to be. Okay. So that for me, it's peace.
Peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I just need my phone. Maybe pass my phone. So, one thing that I get all my guests to do, and I'll get you to do, is I get them to write a question for me to ask my guest, and obviously you are my guest.
Okay.
And what my guest has asked is, what is the biggest way that you've impacted an individual's life?
Okay, the biggest way. That's difficult because I have such a big impact on loads of people. Do you know what? It's not often that you get feedback, direct feedback from the people that you work with. But there was one case that I worked on, and it was a young person who struggled with OCD, and I'd never really worked with OCD or knew much about it. So I was kind of like doubting myself, and like I wasn't really sure of what I was doing, basically, or if I was actually making a difference. And I did get feedback from her that she like started to think about herself in a different way, and started to think about her mental health in a different way, and had a lot more hope for the future. And I think that that's a big thing to help someone with. So yeah, that was really nice feedback to get.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think as a psychologist, you will impact a lot of people's lives and change a lot of people's lives. Because at the end of the day, they're coming to you with their issues that need to be fixed, and you're going to be the trained person to help them.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, you will. So, Emma, where can they find you? Like you said, for any young aspiring Black therapist, where can they find you on Instagram? Speak to that camera.
So my @ is ahagenx. So yeah, if any questions or if you have any questions about mental health or how to get into psychology, you can find me on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, that's been the end of the episode, guys. Amma, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, guys, I will see you on the next episode. Peace.